Okay, so I'm also presenting on gentrification in the South Bronx. And just to give a bit of a background, sorry, should be my introduction. Um, so the South Bronx is facing rising pressures from redevelopment, which brings investment, but also the risk of displacing long-term residents. Affordable housing is a critical need as rents continue to outpace local incomes, making it difficult for families to stay in their homes and communities. At the same time, many residents struggle to maintain economic security amid shifting job opportunities and rising living costs. Beyond housing and income, preserving the community's cultural identity is essential as the neighborhood's heritage and traditions are at risk of being eroded. And to give a bit of a background, decades of disinvestment from the 1970s to the 1990s, which include redlining, discriminatory lending, and highway construction, fractured communities. Public and private investments were withdrawn. Community rebuilding, which include local organizations, worked to restore housing and stabilize blocks. Grassroots activism pushed for better services and investment. And then we come to rising market pressures from the 2000s to present. New York City housing prices soared, making the South Bronx a target for developers. Rezoning and infrastructure improvements accelerated redevelopment, influx of higher income residents, and new luxury projects. And the current impacts: rising rents and displacement pressures, concerns about cultural erasure and loss of community control, tension between neighborhood revitalization and resident stability. Next, I want to look at my conflict map that was prepared for this. So the conflict map visualizes the competing forces at work here, relationship in the gentrification. At the center, we have current residents who experience the greatest pressure of economic, political, and social structure shift around them. The map highlights how incoming residents, developers, and building owners interact to drive rising housing prices and change local businesses. On the structural side, we have the economic factors like income levels and affordability, as well as social factors such as race and neighborhood stigma, which feeds directly into the displacement risk for long-term residents. Historical planning decisions and city planners continue to influence what development is approved and what communities are prioritized, and which communities are prioritized, often reinforcing older patterns of inequity. The map also shows how quality of life issues such as trash, drugs, prostitution, and violence affect both the perception of the neighborhood and policy responses. These conditions can generate fear among residents and protest movements pushing back against redevelopment. By mapping these relationships, we can see that gentrification is not a simple process of new residents moving in. It's a complex conflict ecosystem involving economic incentives, political decisions, social inequalities, and community responses. The diagram also helps us understand how these forces overlap and where interventions might support more equitable development in the South Bronx. For this case, I looked at some theories, And the first one is critical race theory, which shows how race, law, and power shape redevelopment outcomes. It also reveals how policies disproportionately burden communities of color. Then there's the rent gap theory, which explains the profit-driven logic behind redevelopment. Gentrification emerges when potential land values exceed current value. And I also looked at human needs theory, which is not there, but the human needs theory helps explain how affordable housing, economic security, and cultural identity function as core needs that shape community experiences. Next, I identified 3 needs for this capstone: affordable housing, economic security, and cultural preservation. And the intervention methods used here for affordable housing is the community land trusts, which offer permanent, affordable community-owned housing to residents. It addresses rising rents and displacement of the South Bronx. It's implemented through resident partnerships, policymakers, and mixed funding. And the rationale here is long-term affordability, community control, and cultural stability. Community land trusts are great ways of helping residents stay in their communities. The next intervention method is for the economic security, and this is done through job training and small business support to strengthen residents' economic stability, needed due to rising costs, job insecurity, and the risk of displacement. It's also implemented via partnerships, grants, loans, and workforce programs. And the rationale proven models show economic empowerment helps residents remain in their communities. The next one is cultural intervention method on cultural preservation. This protects cultural sites through landmarking and community-led preservation. It's needed to maintain South Bronx cultural identity amid redevelopment, implemented via mapping cultural assets, resident committees, and policy advocacy. And the rationale for this is prevents cultural erasure and supports inclusion, community-driven development. Next, I move on to monitoring and evaluation. And here, progress is tracked and is to track progress and adjust strategies, ensure accountability, protect residents and community stability, collect rent, occupancy, income, and employment data, gather community feedback, monitor funding and programs, measure key indicators, and maintain hope and visible outcomes. Where's Edwin? Thank you. All right, and then we move on to building sustainable networks. And so I have here some strategies. The first one is inclusive and adaptable networks. And an example is the CLT's coalition I spoke about earlier. Distributive leadership and shared direction, example, network of resident-led committees. Connected, isolated actors, this include cross-sector affordability housing task force. Strengthen trust and collaboration. Example, long-term relationships building between residents and developers, and amplify diverse voices, ensure equity reach beyond familiar circles, example, storytelling forums. Oh, sorry, this is not for you. And also, by combining frameworks like research-based management and participatory action research to monitor and evaluation and building sustainable networks, these strategies ensure that community-defined priorities are not only acted upon, but also measured and sustained, creating accountability and resilient networks that deliver lasting impact. Okay. And finally, affordable housing must be protected to prevent displacement and support long-term residents. Economic security is essential to communities' stability and opportunities for upward mobility. Cultural preservation ensures the South Bronx retains the identity, history, and pride that defines it. Thank you, everyone.